Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'll be sharing my thoughts on the Season 8 premiere of Game of Thrones. As is the norm with my reviews, I won't be holding back on any spoilers, so please do bear that in mind. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. It's kind of weird going into this review knowing that most Game of Thrones fans have had to wait nearly 2 years for the show to resume since the end of Season 7. Whereas I, someone who only started watching the show late last year and finished it on Saturday, had to endure a wait of 2 days from finishing Season 7 to the Season 8 premiere. Now I chose to use the word endure not to try and be sarcastic, but because the last 2 days have genuinely felt like a long time to me. I mean, how can they not, when what I'm waiting for is arguably the biggest TV event of all time? Well, certainly I'd say the biggest event in my lifetime anyway. Coverage of Game of Thrones is absolutely everywhere. I've seen it on the front page of newspapers, I've seen it on daytime TV, and of course it's all over the internet, and it's kind of impossible not to be swept up with all this hype surrounding the show, even if you're someone who doesn't watch the show. So of course the big question then is, does this episode deliver? Well, I would say that it does pretty well considering the ridiculous expectations that it had to deal with. For the record, I wasn't a huge fan of Season 7. It felt rushed, it had some really dumb storytelling, and focused too much on epic battles and set pieces instead of the characters themselves. With this episode following on from the fall of the wall, and with there only being 6 episodes left, I thought this season was going to be action-packed from the get-go. However, the premiere is a much more slowed down affair, more like the Game of Thrones of old, and I think that works to its advantage. The majority of this episode takes place in Winterfell simply because that's where most of the characters are at the moment. This episode features more reunions than a 90s pop band comeback festival, and like a middle-aged woman seeing all her favourite bands back on stage, there was part of me that just wanted to scream in excitement when seeing the characters we've been following for so long meet each other again. Where do I start? Jon reunites with Bran, Arya and Sam, Tyrion says hello to his estranged wife Sansa, Arya runs into both Gendry and the Hound. I mean, there's so many moments like this which you can't help but watch and smile at. Despite the imminent threat of the White Walkers, this was a strangely upbeat episode, which just means it's going to be an even bigger emotional gut punch when half of these characters do kick the bucket in the later episodes. The only characters who didn't acknowledge each other who I was hoping would were Jorah and Lyanna Mormont. According to the internet, they are both cousins, but they didn't even look at each other. To be fair, they might not even know who each other is, but it would be nice to see these two interact with one another at least once before the show ends. With all these characters back at Winterfell, the hot topic in everyone's lips during this episode was the Dragon Queen Daenerys, who finally arrived in the North. Jon said the North wouldn't approve of being ruled by an outsider, and he's proven right throughout this episode. Lyanna Mormont correctly points out that the people of Winterfell chose Jon to be the king in the North, yet now he's returned, given up his crown, and expects everyone to accept Daenerys as their queen. Of course, I understand the reasons behind why Jon did this, but you can also understand why the people of the North feel pissed off and betrayed by his decision. They don't want Daenerys as their queen, but unfortunately that's what they've ended up with. I'm not going to lie about it, I don't like Daenerys, and I never have, and it irritates me how she constantly prattles on about how her people chose her and how everyone believes in her, yet here she is giving the people of the North no choice in who they want as their leader. So I completely understand why the Northern Lords are sceptical of her, as are Jon's family. Lady Sansa in particular doesn't like the sight of Daenerys getting her claws into Jon, and quite rightly so. This isn't lost on Daenerys either, who notices that Sansa isn't fond of her and even goes as far as to mention this to Jon, which Jon simply shrugs off by telling her basically not to worry about it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think that Jon's family being wary of Daenerys is a completely reasonable thing to expect. As the oldest sibling within my family, I'm often wary about my brothers and my sister getting into relationships because I'm protective of them and I don't want to see them get hurt. And on the other hand, I've been in relationships previously where my girlfriend's families haven't liked me at first, which again I think is completely normal. Granted, my wife's family were pretty welcoming towards me from the get-go, but their dog absolutely hated me the first time I went round her house. Now though, the little shit won't leave me alone. Seriously, every time I go there it's trying to hump my leg, jumping up me, just please, leave me alone. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that trust takes time to build. I think it's very rare for someone to go into a relationship and not have at least one person from their significant other's family take a disliking to them until they've gotten to know them, which is why I find Daenerys' response to Jon in this scene to be so bloody weird. She basically says something along the lines of to Jon, your sister doesn't respect me, but I'm the queen, in this threatening manner, as if Sansa should immediately worship the ground that she walks on. You know what, Daenerys, you can get fucked. The respect has to be earned. It seems that her ego is so inflated that she can't fathom the fact that someone doesn't think of highly of her as she does herself. She's almost like the Game of Thrones version of Kanye West. To be honest, I just think she's a spoilt brat who throws her toys out the pram when she doesn't get what she wants. Sorry Dany fans, but I just see see her as nothing more than an egotistical, power-obsessed hypocrite, and this episode does nothing but further my belief in this. Thankfully, the show is hinting that Jon might wake up to Daenerys' true nature before the season ends, as Sam informs him what she did to his father and her brother, his brother. For the record, I think that Sam did a really good job of trying to hold it all together in front of the Queen, and maybe if it had just been his dad who she killed, he might have been able to overlook it, because let's be honest, his dad was a complete dick. However, immediately after it's revealed that his dad was burnt to a crisp, Sam holds back the tears and says at least he will be able to return home now that his brother is in charge. Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to do that, Sam. Yeah, that piece of dialogue was pretty hard to hear. We all knew that Sam's brother was also dead, and we were waiting for Dany to rip his heart into pieces by revealing that only ashes are what also remain of his brother. It's even more devastating when you consider that Sam had saved one of Daenerys' closest friends in Jorah and was asking the Queen for a pardon for stealing some books. And what does he get as a reward from his lovely Queen? The reveal that his family are dead. Thanks, Dany. Despite the relatively small amount of screen time that Sam got during this installment, I think his actor put in one of the best performances of the episode during the conversation he had with Daenerys. Anyway, as I was saying, Jon is informed of this, and disappointingly, he instinctively jumps to Daenerys' defense. Come on, Jon, what happened to crows before hoes? Sam suggests to Jon that had he been in that position, he might have showed his enemies mercy, which I think is a fair point. Sadly, even this doesn't seem to convince him that Dany might be a bad person, but I'm hopeful that the big reveal that he is the rightful king will make him realise that he no longer needs to bend the knee to the Queen of Dragons. Jon Snow is the true heir to the Iron Throne, and although we all knew this is the first time his character finds out about it. It's obvious the North doesn't like Daenerys, they want Jon as their king, and although Jon gave up his crown and his title as king in the North, this might just be the kick up the arse he needs to stake his claim as not just the king of the North, but the king of Westeros. I think Jon might hold off challenging Daenerys until the immediate threat of the army of the dead is taken care of, but I don't see them achieving the fairy tale king and queen ending come the end of the season that many people seem to be hoping for. Also, with Jon now knowing that Daenerys is his aunt, will he now decide to bail on their relationship? The majority of Westeros were disgusted by the fact that Jaime and Cersei were shagging each other, and I can't see them getting behind a king and a queen who are auntie and nephew. Yeah, you could argue that Jon and Daenerys' relationship isn't as bad as a brother and a sister having sex, but it's still pretty messed up. Before I move on, I just want to say that I did think it was a bit weird that Bran thought that Sam should be the one to tell Jon about his lineage rather than the family that he grew up with. I mean, maybe Sam was the better choice as he actually knows how to show some human emotion as opposed to the robotic Stephen Hawking-like Bran, but it was still a bit odd. Moving away now from Winterfell to King's Landing, where we check in with the evil Queen Cersei. One of the moments that shocked me the most during this episode was when she found out the news that the wall had been broken down by the dead, in which she just gives this menacing grin and says, "Good." Good? What the hell is wrong with you, woman? Everyone's gonna die! But no, Cersei doesn't care, she just worries about how the dead invasion can benefit her, which just goes to show what an abhorrent woman she is. Also, if that wasn't bad enough, she tasked Bronn with killing both Tyrion and Jaime with the same crossbow that Tyrion killed her dad with. I can understand her wanting to kill Tyrion to an extent because she's never really liked him, even if her reasoning behind why is a load of bollocks. However, Jaime on the other hand, really? You're going to kill the man who's been at your side from the start, the man who lost his hand for you, the man who's killed for you. After everything Jaime has done for her, she's going to stab him in the back, just because he's clever enough to realise the scale of the threat the Night King poses. What an absolute bitch. I really hope the Night King finds her and rips her head off. The only positive I can take from this is the fact that Cersei entrusted Bronn to be the one to carry out the killing. I know Bronn does love his gold, but Tyrion and Jaime are both good friends of his, and I don't think he has it in him to kill both of them. We'll just have to wait and see. Whilst I'm on the topic of Cersei, she starts banging Euron this episode. The slimy bastard kept pestering her for sex, and he finally got what he wanted. This is certainly a weird coupling, but it appears as if Cersei likes the fact that Euron isn't scared of her. Cersei is used to being the one calling the shots, so perhaps she wants someone who can put her in her place. I mean, she does say that she likes his arrogance. Or perhaps this could all be an act, and Cersei does actually hate him. The thing is, you never know what Cersei's actually thinking. I'm sure you all picked up on the fact that Euron says he wants to put a prince in Cersei. Now I'm thinking that Cersei will perhaps claim that the child she is currently bearing is his in order to solidify her position and also to get back at Jaime, because that's the kind of spiteful person she is. Watch this space. Euron isn't the only Greyjoy to feature in this episode, as Theon manages to finally put Reek behind him and find the strength to save his sister Yara. Now I don't know what the general opinion is regarding Theon, but I like him and have done since the start. Sure, he's done nasty things, but he's more than paid for it in my opinion anyway, and it's good to see him actively trying to atone for his sins. I do worry though that with him now setting off to Winterfell that he isn't going to make it to the end. His story is just set up for a heroic death surrounded by the family who raised him as the final step of his redemption arc, and as much as I like Theon, I would be very surprised if he makes it out of this season alive. The last characters we are going to check on is Tormund and his new Night's Watch, as he calls them, who encounter the actual Night's Watch. Tormund's line about always having blue eyes cracked me up. We need more of Tormund this season. Apart from that, not a lot else happens aside from them finding a creepy message from the Night King with an even creepier undead boy attached to it. There's plenty of theories out there as to what this symbol actually means, but quite frankly, this review is going to be long enough anyway, so I haven't got time to talk about them. So nothing more to say really about this section of the episode, other than I'm sure that we will see more of these characters during the next couple of installments. The Season 8 premiere ends on a cliffhanger of Jaime appearing at Winterfell. To be honest, it wasn't really a surprise it was him, because he was the only major character we hadn't seen at all during the episode up until that point. However, it was still a great way to finish this installment. It's kind of funny that the old friend that Bran said he was waiting for was Jaime all along, and I can't help but wonder how awkward their first conversation will be with one another. As cliffhangers go, this one has got me majorly excited for the next episode. Before I wrap things up, there are a few other things that I quickly want to mention. Firstly, I liked how the opening echoed the first episode of the show. I remember Arya scrambling around Winterfell trying to get a better look at the Lannisters, and we see another kid doing the exact same in order to gain a better view of the Queen of Dragons. Also, seeing Daenerys introduce herself to all of the Starks evoked memories of them all waiting in line to greet Cersei, Robb and Joffrey. Secondly, does anyone else think that Gendry and Arya are going to become a thing? She was obviously pleased to see him, and the two do have chemistry, certainly more than Jon and Daenerys anyway. Thirdly, once again I found that Sansa seemed to be the voice of reason during this episode. She was switched on enough to tell Tyrion that Cersei wasn't coming to help them, and spoke out against Jon revoking his title as King in the North. Sansa has learnt an awful lot during her rough last couple of years, with her coming out of her marriages to Joffrey and Ramsay all the wiser. I know I'm probably in the minority here because most people seem to be Team Jon, but I think I'd actually rather her sit on the throne over him, but that's something to talk about another day. Although I like the majority of what the episode have to offer, some of it did feel a bit rushed. I was hoping to spend a bit more time with Jon when he first arrived back at Winterfell, only for Bran to then interrupt and say there's not enough time before the episode swiftly moved on to another scene. Whoa, hang on a minute, there's a lot of characters here meeting each other for the first time or meeting again after being separated. Calm down, Mr. Three-Eyed Raven, let everyone say hello first. Jesus. Speaking of Bran, I find it weird how all the characters seem to be treating him like the weird kid who sits at the back of the class, by basically ignoring him. Bran is a fountain of knowledge, but the characters don't seem to try and do anything with it really. If it were me, I'd be finding out everything that I could about the White Walkers and the Night King from him. I don't know, maybe this stuff does happen and it just happens off screen, but it feels weird that Jon, Arya and Sansa haven't really tried to discuss with him what exactly he is capable of. Lastly, I'm sure this will be a controversial point, but Jon riding a dragon bored the bloody tits off me. I know a lot of people instantly have an orgasm as soon as they see a dragon on Game of Thrones, but personally I've never really seen the fascination with dragons. So seeing Jon fly around for 5 minutes was the equivalent of me watching the dreadful pod racing segment in Star Wars Episode 1. And by that what I mean is that this time could be better served doing something else, but maybe that's just me, as most people seem to love the sight of Jon riding the dragon. I, however, just found it a bit boring. And that's about all I have to say really. The Season 8 premiere wasn't the all-out action affair that I was expecting, but I think that's a good thing. There's so many characters that we desperately needed to spend some time with, and thankfully this episode slowed things down a bit. However, I do think there are still some aspects that are being too quickly glossed over and ignored altogether, but I guess that's bound to happen when a show has 6 episodes to wrap up 7 years of storylines. So overall, a good episode that leaves me excited for the rest of the season. So there you have it, that's my review of the first episode of the last season of Game of Thrones. Please let me know your thoughts below. Did you love this episode? Did you hate it? Did you think it was a bit meh? Whatever your thoughts, please just let me know. And with that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care and goodbye.